Hello friends, welcome to your Global Stories channel, where every week we talk about stories. This time I will tell you things you didn't know about the Vietnam War. Please stay for the end of the video. Framed in the Cold War period, Vietnam was a long conflict that took place between 1955 and 1975. The pro-Western Republic of South Vietnam, supported by the United States, 1965 to 1973, confronted the communist North Vietnam. Largely fought in the south of Vietnam, the war caused a very high death toll. Around 2 million Vietnamese civilians lost their lives, to which must be added the death of more than 1 million men among the North Vietnamese forces, not to mention some 250,000 South Vietnamese killed and the 58,000 military personnel lost by the United States. The conflict reached such a scale that it even spread to Laos and Cambodia. The Vietnam War had an enormous impact on U.S. politics, society, and the economy. In an effort to halt the spread of communism, the Americans embarked on a fierce jungle war, confronting Viet Cong guerrilla warfare and bombing large swathes of the country. The Vietnam War was widely covered in the press, revealing the rawness of the conflict and the human rights abuses perpetrated by both sides. After endless years of war, Vietnam finally fell into communist hands in 1975. The consequences of the war were terrible, as its infrastructure was destroyed, while bombing with chemical agents caused significant environmental damage. On the other hand, Vietnam's economy, which was primarily agricultural, also suffered considerable damage, as rural areas were turned into battlefields. Thus, unexploded ordnance remained among the crops, not to mention that the rice fields had been bombed with herbicides and defoliants. French defeat in Indochina. During World War II, Japanese troops had occupied Vietnam. However, with the Japanese capitulation, the North fell into the hands of the communist and anti-colonialist Viet Minh movement, led by Ho Chi Minh. In contrast, in the South, British troops returned sovereignty to France. The French tried to regain full control of their colonies, but they faced a formidable and determined enemy, the Viet Minh. Between 1946 and 1954, French forces confronted Vietnamese communist troops. The disastrous French military defeat at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954 marked the end of the conflict, which was embodied in the Geneva Accords, signed in the same year. The result of these agreements was that Indochina was divided into several independent states: Laos, Cambodia, South Vietnam, and North Vietnam. The progressive involvement of the United States. The growing popularity of Ho Chi Minh and the spread of communism in Southeast Asia was of considerable concern to U.S. leaders. As a result, the United States became increasingly involved in Vietnam, supporting Ngo Dinh Diem as president of South Vietnam. However, Ngo Dinh Diem, who was a Catholic, was rejected by the largely Buddhist Vietnamese population. The successive deterioration of Ngo Dinh Diem's popularity and of his relations with the United States would eventually lead to his downfall through a coup d'état and his assassination in 1963. Vietnam was immersed in a civil war between the communist North and the pro-American South. Meanwhile, the United States was beginning to turn to the South, sending military advisors. The United States in the Vietnam War. Increasing U.S. military support for South Vietnam was proving insufficient to stop the communist forces in North Vietnam. But come August 3, 1964, 2 U.S. destroyers were allegedly attacked by the North Vietnamese in the waters of the Gulf of Tonkin. As a result, President Johnson opted for an escalation of the war in the country. The increase of troops was continuous until 1968, when they exceeded 500,000 men. The geography of a country like Vietnam, with jungles, rivers and mountains, made military operations complicated even for an army like that of the United States. At the same time, the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong guerrillas were two very tenacious and difficult opponents to defeat. The aerial bombardments caused a great number of casualties and terrible suffering among the civilian population. The napalm incendiary bombs, or the effects of chemical bombing on Vietnamese crops, were clear proof of this. A key event in the course of the conflict was the Tet Offensive in 1968. Attacking by surprise at various points in the country, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army engaged in a major battle with the Americans and their South Vietnamese allies. Although the U.S. managed to win the battle, discontent was growing in American society. Images of the atrocities committed in the war and the numbers of American soldiers killed in Vietnam took their toll on American morale. Thus, with 1968 drawing to a close, the United States changed its strategy. Its plans called for a reduced military presence in the country and increased air strikes. As part of this strategy, it was also intended to strengthen the South Vietnamese Army so that a U.S. withdrawal from Vietnam would be possible. Faced with the great difficulty of defeating an enemy like North Vietnam, which could afford a very high number of casualties, the United States decided that the time was right for negotiations. Finally, in 1973, in line with what had been agreed at the Paris Conference, the United States proceeded to military withdrawal from Vietnam and a ceasefire was established. This brief hiatus was broken when North Vietnam launched an invasion of the South. With the South Vietnamese regime fighting alone, now with little U.S. backing and plagued by corruption, the Communists finally succeeded in gaining full control of Vietnam in 1975. The Vietnam War on the economic level. Agriculture was the fundamental element in the Vietnamese economy. However, there was a profound difference between the economic reality of the North and the economy of the South. Precisely in the South, the strong injection of U.S. funds allowed the South to increase its industrial production. Likewise, the money provided by the United States helped rebuild infrastructure such as ports. However, with the United States disengaging from the conflict after 1973, economic aid to South Vietnam dropped considerably. A clear example is that, in 1974, a military aid package of $1.5 billion was eventually cut to $700 million. Further signs of South Vietnam's political and economic deterioration were its corruption. Much of the money ended up going into the pockets of corrupt politicians, military, and civil servants. Moreover, the middle classes were fed up with having to continually pay taxes in the midst of a war that seemed to have no end in sight. For the United States, the Vietnam War was an especially expensive conflict. Having hundreds of thousands of men deployed in a country so far away meant a huge logistical effort. Billions of dollars were spent on adapting the destroyed Vietnamese infrastructure to supply its army and erecting large supply depots. Click on the link in the description of this video where you can get a free self-help book. Thanks for watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.